On a cold morning near Avdiivka in early 2025, a single mechanized assault began that would expose a deeper truth about this war. What unfolded on that sector of the Donetsk front showed how fast the battlefield is changing and how quickly older doctrines collapse when pressure rises. Ukrainian forces moved with a level of coordination many did not expect, while Russian units struggled to react in time. The fight looked small on the map, yet every decision, every second, and every movement revealed a widening gap in training, technology, and battlefield awareness. To understand why the front is shifting, we must follow what happened in the minutes that followed. Those minutes began with a Bradley moving toward its drop zone under Russian fire. Avdiivka has long been a key point on the Donetsk front because it controls several roads and offers high ground that shapes the wider battle. Ukrainian and Russian forces have fought around this area for years, and repeated Russian attempts to break through have failed due to strong defenses and difficult terrain. Reports from the Institute for the Study of War note that Russian units have tried to encircle Avdiivka many times since 2014, yet each advance slowed once Ukrainian artillery and drones began to correct fire. This history explains why every movement near the city matters, as both armies understand the value of even a small gain. On this morning, the 47th Mechanized Brigade moved toward a planned strike point with a clear mission and a short window to act. The brigade chose the M2A2 ODSSA Bradley for this task because its sensors, armor, and navigation tools allow it to approach dangerous areas faster than older Soviet-designed vehicles. The variant in use includes upgraded thermal sights and digital maps, which give crews more awareness in low visibility. These features matter in a place like Avdiivka, where fields, tree lines, and damaged industrial sites make it easy for defenders to hide. Inside the Bradley, the infantry sat in tight rows as the vehicle rolled toward the release point. The soldiers stayed quiet but fully focused because they knew Russian observation posts were nearby. Updated battlefield intelligence helped guide their movement, as Ukrainian drones had tracked Russian firing positions earlier that morning. Each soldier understood his task, and they reviewed the plan again as the Bradley closed the distance. The calm inside the vehicle was not the calm of safety, but the calm that comes from training and discipline. Russian forces detected the Bradley before it reached the drop zone, and their artillery reacted without delay. Russian crews fired based on sound and last known movement because they lacked steady drone coverage, which has been a recurring issue confirmed by Reuters and ISW. Without eyes in the sky, Russian gunners depended on rough estimates, and this reduced the accuracy of their strikes. Several rounds landed behind the Bradley, sending shockwaves across the fields, but none were close enough to stop the advance. The Bradley halts only for a moment when it reaches the release point, and the infantry begin their practiced dismount. Speed is the most important part of this phase, and each soldier leaves the vehicle in a smooth flow. The teams split into small assault groups and move toward the trenches with deliberate steps, trying to stay ahead of adjusted fire. Years of training show in these seconds, as no one hesitates or loses spacing. By the time Russian gunners attempt to correct their aim, the infantry are already spread out across several approach lanes. This initial dispersion under fire becomes the first major advantage for the Ukrainian assault. Small units are harder to target, and movement in different directions forces Russian observers to guess which line matters most. The infantry use short bursts of sprinting and brief pauses behind natural cover to reduce exposure. Although artillery continues to fall, the pattern remains scattered and delayed, giving Ukraine the momentum it needs to close the gap. The Bradley crew watches the infantry advance and updates their understanding of the battlefield through onboard sensors. Once the soldiers gain distance and begin to push the front line forward, the vehicle prepares for its next role. The shift from transport to fire support is critical because each phase of the assault depends on smooth timing. The Bradley must suppress Russian positions before the infantry reach the final stretch of open ground. Once the infantry were moving safely, the Bradley shifted roles and began shaping the battlefield with direct fire. The Bradley gained the advantage early by reaching a firing position that gave its crew a clear view of Russian movement. The vehicle used small folds in the ground to hide most of its hull, and this allowed the gunner to focus on targets without taking unnecessary risks. Thermal sights helped the crew see through smoke and dust, which often block regular optics. These tools matter because battles near Avdiivka often take place in mixed terrain, and Reuters has reported that both sides rely on thermal systems to identify threats at long range. With a protected angle and steady aim, the Bradley prepared to meet the first Russian push. 2 Russian BTR-82A carriers rushed toward the front line because their commanders feared losing the trenches. The BTR-82A is fast and built for quick movement, yet its armor is thin and vulnerable to modern autocannon fire. According to the Russian manufacturer's own data, the vehicle was designed for mobility rather than survival, and Jane's Defense Review notes that its steel plating cannot stop 25mm rounds at close distance. As the carriers closed in, they carried troops who expected to reinforce the Russian line before Ukrainian infantry reached the trenches. Instead, they entered the Bradley's field of fire at the worst possible moment. The Bradley's crew acted without delay, and the 25mm cannon opened fire with controlled bursts. The first BTR-82A lost momentum immediately as rounds pierced the front and sides, sending sparks and fragments across the road. Flames rose from the chassis, and the vehicle slid to a stop before any soldier could dismount. The second carrier attempted to push through, but it met the same result within seconds. When the shooting ended, the Russian infantry who had expected to arrive under armor were left stranded in an exposed area. With no cover and no transport, they could not support the trenches, and their planned counterattack collapsed before it began. A separate threat appeared on a different axis when a Russian tank moved into position with its turret pointed away from the Bradley. The Ukrainian crew recognized the opportunity because tanks need time to rotate and aim accurately, especially when surprised. The gunner prepared a Tau-2 missile, which is known for its high penetration power and long engagement range. U.S. Army fact sheets explain that the Tau-2 can defeat heavy armor even when the target tries to maneuver. Once the launcher fired, the missile tracked toward the tank, and the Russian crew had no time to react. The impact produced a bright flash, and the vehicle became disabled almost at once. The same Bradley kept watch for additional threats and soon detected a stationary BMP positioned near damaged buildings. BMP infantry vehicles can carry troops and provide fire support, but older models lack the protection needed to survive modern anti-armor weapons. Jane's reports show that many BMPs in this region have outdated side armor, which makes them vulnerable even when not moving. The Bradley engaged the target quickly, and the BMP was destroyed before it could join the fight. With another armored unit gone, the Russian line lost more of its ability to anchor a defense. These rapid losses had a clear tactical effect because they removed Russia's mobility and protection in the opening phase of the battle. Armored vehicles allow infantry to move safely and coordinate fire. Yet once these assets disappear, soldiers are forced to hold ground with limited options. The destroyed BTRS, damaged tank, and eliminated BMP left Russian troops scattered and under pressure from several angles. This shift gave Ukrainian forces more room to maneuver, and it allowed the assault teams to push closer to the trenches with less resistance. With armor neutralized, the battle shifted into the trenches, where infantry skill would decide the next phase. Ukrainian assault teams closed the distance quickly, and this pushed the fight into close range where every movement mattered. Once the soldiers reached less than 50 meters from the Russian line, the nature of the battle changed because trenches create sharp angles and limited visibility. Close-quarter fighting demands focus and steady coordination, and ISW has reported that this kind of combat often favors units with clear communication and fast decision-making. As the teams advanced, they used short bursts of fire to keep Russian shooters from settling into stronger positions. The infantry rotated firing positions to maintain pressure while denying Russian troops any chance to organize counterfire. This tactic works well in tight areas because it creates constant movement, and defenders struggle to track targets that change angles repeatedly. Each team took turns covering the next group, allowing steady progress without leaving open gaps. This method also spreads risk, since no single position becomes predictable for too long. Reuters has noted that Ukrainian units often train for rapid shifts during trench assaults, as these changes limit the effect of machine gun bursts and reduce exposure to grenade blasts. While the soldiers pushed forward on the ground, the Bradleys scanned the area for muzzle flashes, and this allowed them to silence Russian firing points before those positions could slow the advance. Thermal sights helped the crews identify shooters hiding behind broken walls, tree lines, or soil ridges. Once a flash appeared, the Bradleys reacted with precise bursts from the autocannon, forcing Russian troops to take cover or abandon their posts. This coordination between infantry and vehicles is one of the main reasons Ukrainian assaults gain momentum, even in narrow terrain. Jane's defense reporting shows that the Bradley's targeting systems can spot movement faster than older Soviet sensors, which gives crews more time to act. After clearing the immediate sector, Ukrainian commanders ordered a tactical withdrawal to avoid stretching their forces too far. A controlled pullback allows units to avoid unnecessary losses while preparing for the next move. The soldiers return to the collection point in small groups, maintaining spacing to avoid becoming targets for artillery. Tactical withdrawals like this are common when the first objective is complete, and they help commanders reset the formation before planning another push. This step is important because Russian units often try to strike retreating forces with indirect fire if they sense disorder. One Bradley carrying infantry came under sudden attack as it began leaving the area, and the vehicle avoided an anti-tank guided missile followed by mortar rounds through a combination of skilled driving and its defensive features. ATGMs are designed to hit slow or exposed vehicles, yet fast maneuvers and rapid changes in direction can break the missile's tracking path. Mortar fire also missed because the crew reacted before the shells could land, and this quick movement saved both the soldiers and the vehicle. A second Bradley was not as fortunate, since it was hit several times and became immobile near the edge of the combat zone. Even after multiple impacts, the armor protected the crew, and they remained alive despite the damage. This outcome is consistent with U.S. Army data showing that Bradley hulls are built to resist fragmentation and shaped charge effects, which increases survivability even during heavy strikes. The vehicle could not continue, but the crew stayed inside until help arrived. A third Bradley rushed forward under fire and extracted the stranded crew, then pulled back before Russian forces could close in. This rescue action allowed Ukraine to preserve manpower, and although the damaged vehicle was left behind, commanders believe it can likely be recovered later. Saving trained crews matters greatly in a long conflict, and ISW notes that Ukraine has prioritized protecting experienced operators because they are difficult to replace. With the withdrawal complete, Ukrainian commanders prepared a follow-up move to prevent Russian regrouping. Ukraine launched a pursuit operation because commanders wanted to stop Russian troops from forming new defensive lines in nearby villages. When Russian units retreat under pressure, they often move into small settlements to regroup and build new firing points. ISW has documented many cases on the Donetsk front where local setbacks turned into larger problems once Russian soldiers reassembled inside crowded areas. To prevent this cycle, Ukrainian forces acted quickly after completing the withdrawal, using speed to keep Russian positions unstable. A combined team of Bradleys and an Abrams tank advanced toward the next objective because each vehicle brought different strengths that worked well together. The Abrams offered powerful long-range fire with a smoothbore gun capable of striking targets behind cover, while the Bradley added precise targeting tools and fast maneuverability. Both platforms are familiar to American audiences, since U.S. Army manuals describe them as complementary systems that support infantry during high-risk movement. In this case, the Abrams controlled open spaces and forced Russian fighters to stay low, while the Bradley scanned side angles and marked threats for the tank. This mix helped Ukraine move through difficult terrain without losing momentum. Russian infantry lacked modern anti-tank systems in this area, and this left them at a major disadvantage when Ukrainian armor pushed close. Several field reports from Reuters show that many Russian units still depend on RPGs that require good timing and steady aim to strike moving vehicles. RPG-7 models, for example, are most effective at short distances, and even then, they lose accuracy when the shooter is under stress. Modern missiles like Javelin and NLAW correct these issues through automated guidance, which is why training and equipment matter so much. Ukrainian armor teams understood this gap, so they advanced in controlled lines that denied Russian crews clean firing angles. As the armor moved forward, Ukrainian crews suppressed houses, trenches, and tree lines where Russian soldiers attempted to reorganize. These areas often serve as temporary shelters for retreating troops, yet they become dangerous once armored vehicles arrive. The Abrams used its thermal sights to locate fighters hiding behind damaged walls, and the Bradley followed by firing on smaller targets that tried to shift positions. Jane's Defense Review notes that modern armor excels at isolating pockets of infantry because tanks and IFVs can lock onto enemy movement before soldiers reposition. This made it difficult for Russian groups to prepare a unified response. Coordination and communication within the Ukrainian formation created a chain of effects that weakened Russian efforts to restore the line. When the tank fired on one sector, Russian fighters moved to new places, and those movements exposed them to the Bradley. When the Bradley targeted a tree line, infantry squads gained safe paths to advance. Each step supported the next, and this rhythm made the chase more effective. ISW often highlights that synchronized maneuver is one of Ukraine's strongest advantages, especially when Russian units are scattered and unable to share information quickly. The discipline shown during this pursuit mattered because it kept pressure on Russian troops who were already under strain from earlier losses. Russian forces rely heavily on short bursts of resistance to slow Ukrainian progress, but these attempts fail when they face steady armored movement. Once Russian soldiers lose protected vehicles, their ability to hold ground, reposition, or strike back becomes limited. Ukraine used this knowledge to expand its control of the area and prevent the front from stabilizing. But on another sector of the Donetsk front, a different battle was unfolding, one fought in the air as much as on the ground. Ukrainian special forces moved quickly toward the front in light buggies, and their speed became both an advantage and a risk. These vehicles allow rapid movement across open ground, yet they offer little protection against drones or artillery. As the column advanced, a Russian FPV drone dropped suddenly from the sky and almost struck the lead buggy. The near hit showed how unpredictable the airspace has become on this front, and Reuters has reported many similar incidents where explosive drones forced units to change routes or pause movement. The close call did not stop the convoy, but it reminded every soldier that threats can appear without warning. Ukrainian FPV teams launched their own drones moments after the near strike, and they began searching for Russian firing points inside a nearby village. FPVs have become essential because they allow operators to locate small groups of troops hidden in narrow spaces that ground units cannot see. ISW notes that Ukrainian drone crews often train to identify muzzle flashes, movement behind walls, and changes in shadow patterns, which help them detect firing points. As the FPVs moved over the rooftops, their cameras scanned for signs of activity, and each discovery shaped the next step of the assault. Octocopters joined the fight by dropping explosives on fortified Russian positions inside houses and earthworks. These larger drones can carry heavier payloads than FPVs, which makes them effective against trenches reinforced with timber or concrete. Jane's Defense Review reports that octocopters have been used on many sectors of the front to clear enclosed firing points before infantry enter built-up areas. In this operation, the drones released charges through broken windows and roof openings, forcing Russian troops to pull back from strong positions. The strikes weakened the defense inside the village and reduced the number of places where Russian soldiers could hold their ground. Two Russian tanks attempted to counterattack as the drone strikes continued, and their crews hoped to halt the Ukrainian advance by using heavy fire. Tanks usually change the pace of a fight because they carry powerful guns and thick armor, yet these advantages disappear when drones detect them early. Ukrainian operators spotted both tanks as they moved into firing range, and FPVs were launched immediately. FPV drones can strike weak points on armored vehicles, and when they hit the right spot, the damage often triggers internal explosions. According to open-source studies cited by ISW, many Russian tanks have been lost this way during the past year. In this case, both tanks were destroyed quickly, and the blasts echoed across the village. The loss of these armored vehicles collapsed Russian efforts to regain momentum because tanks usually anchor defensive lines during chaotic moments. Without armored support, Russian infantry had to move on foot, and this made them vulnerable to Ukrainian fire from several angles. Reuters has noted that Russian units often break apart once they lose heavy vehicles, since their ability to regroup depends on protected movement. With both tanks gone, the local defense unraveled, and Ukrainian forces pushed forward with fewer obstacles. Poor Russian UAV coverage left many units blind to approaching threats, while Ukrainian teams synchronized infantry, armor, and drones into a single rhythm. Coordination allowed them to strike targets before Russian troops understood what was happening, and this confusion increased with every minute. ISW explains that Russian drone shortages make it difficult for commanders to track Ukrainian movement, leading to late reactions and misplaced fire. In contrast, Ukraine used drones to map routes, confirm targets, and support each phase of the advance. These patterns reveal more than a single tactical victory. They expose a structural imbalance shaping the wider Donetsk front. The engagement near Avdiivka shows how information, timing, and fast coordination now define the outcome of modern battles, and the events across this sector reveal why Russia is losing the ability to control the fight. Ukrainian forces moved with clear communication and steady discipline, and this allowed armored teams, infantry groups, and drone operators to strike in a connected rhythm. Each action weakened Russian defenses because outdated doctrine and slow responses left their units exposed, and Reuters has reported similar failures across the Donetsk region. The destruction of BTRs, BMPs, and tanks also reflects what the Institute for the Study of War calls a systemic lack of battlefield awareness inside many Russian formations. Ukraine's survival of missile strikes, its rapid rescue operations, and its successful counter-chase show a military adapting faster than expected, while Russian forces continue to struggle with poor UAV coverage and limited anti-armor options, as shown in multiple assessments from Jane's defense. These patterns point to a widening gap in decision-making speed, tactical vision, and the ability to fuse old platforms with new technology. If you want more deep military analysis like this, remember to subscribe to Military Force for future reports.